Welcome to the Big Book Study podcast for anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. We are a step study which meets each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find our website at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. I'm Tina from Idaho. We also have Heather from Saskatchewan, Dave from Oregon, Kathleen from Colorado, and Nicole from Texas. Our last podcast was step 3. At the end of that podcast, we had made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of our higher power as we understand our higher power. And now it says we had to get down to causes and conditions to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. We searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. And my comment on this section is that this is a fact-finding, fact-facing process, much like they liken it to taking inventory in a store, so like a grocery store. So we're looking at things that are missing, possibly things that are rotting on the shelves that aren't useful anymore. And we're making some attempts to be rid of the things that aren't working anymore. And the other thing it says about this is that we were going to discover the truth about the stock and trade. So we learn about spiritual law in this process. What are we trading with? Spiritual law, like the law of gravity, which is if we walk off a tall bridge, we're going to crash down to the ground. It's not personal. Nobody's doing it to us. It's simply a law. And we find out about spiritual law, which is that we don't get what we say we want. We get what we are. We get what we're bringing to our relationships. We get what we're bringing to life. So in this process, we're going to start looking at what we are bringing. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. Dave from Oregon. I think one of the things that we have to learn or perhaps take away in the way of instructions with this comparison to a business inventory is a business would do their inventory very promptly and efficiently. Maybe close the store for a couple hours, half a day at the most, all hands on deck, and they need to get the business back open so they don't lose a full day's business. And so if the people who wrote the big book are comparing our inventory to that, it wouldn't make sense to me to take weeks or months or years doing lots and lots and lots of writing in a four-step inventory. It just does not logically make sense. One of the places that they make that so clear is that the insanity of an addict is that we can't even bring up the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, or without defense against the first drink or acting out. So we certainly can't take more than that week or month with this inventory process, this fourth and fifth step process. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Kathleen here in Colorado, and uh, one of the things in this reading is it's basically we have regret, but we're doing an inventory, and if we compare it to a business, we don't get the the book is teaching us we don't get caught up in self-loathing and self-pity, um, self-consciousness. That's not going to help us. We just need to take a look. And I think for before recovery, before working the steps, we spent a lot of time every time we think about maybe something that happened in the past, uh, or an old idea, or yeah, it's something that we've done. We felt so ashamed or guilty that we couldn't stand to look at it. And so this is not to do that again. That's not what this is about. This is about let's take a look, see what we value, see what we don't, and let's move on. Let's let that go. Let's turn that over. So it's not a time for us to be in self pity and self loathing. And this is the first time that we're going to learn about this, because we're going to have to practice this of not being in self loathing and self pity, which is just more selfishness and self obsession and self centeredness. What we are going to have to do for the rest of our lives is we're going to continue to take our inventory on a daily basis, and we can't be helpful and useful to anybody if we're in that self-pity and self-loathing. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Nicole, and it's giving us these first directions here, sort of setting the intention for what our objective is, what we're trying to do. And, I think for many of us coming into recovery, if someone said, "Tell me the story of your life," it would sound very different than these instructions. Like the story of our lives might be everything that happened to us along the way, kind of that the victim mentality, all of the ways that life didn't go our way, all of the harms that were done to us. That's our life story. The highs, the lows, but this is giving us the direction that we're going to take stock honestly, searching for the flaws in our makeup. So, and being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. So they say in the book that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our trouble, and we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of what that looks like. But just all the ways that we've been trying to get life to go our way, trying to get other people to follow our plan or do it our way, the ways that we make stuff about us, all of our dishonesty, the roles that we play, all the ways that we self-seek, trying to get love, get approval, get belonging, etc. So this is really the focus is on us here and what has been our part, the flaws in ourselves that has really manifested all of these ways that life hasn't gone our way. where have we participated in that? And that's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Heather from Saskatchewan. I just wanted to make a quick comment about how this is kind of a couple of paragraphs to give us kind of the mindset for doing step 4. And I think it's telling us that we require to have a little objectivity about our life as much as we can do that, being emotionally attached to everything that's happened. But this is not an exercise where we rethink, refeel, relive all of those hurts and angers that we have in our life. This is an opportunity just to say, cut and dried, this is what it is, this is what I feel about it, and this is what I need to address. And with that, I'll pass.
And so I'll go ahead and pick up the reading where Tina left off. So resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all form of spiritual disease. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which had been interfered with? So I'll go ahead and make a quick comment that, it's like when we're getting down to the root of it, right off of the top of our head, why are we angry, right? The way that we're used to habitually thinking about things is, well, they did because they did X, Y, or Z. And that X, Y, and Z, they did that. So our focus is on the other person. We were hurt, but the impetus or the reason why we're hurt is because of what they did. But they're asking us to look at it really in what's going on with us, and how ultimately, again, it winds back to our selfishness and our self-centeredness. It wasn't so much about what they did. What they did was what they did, but it's how, how it comes back and circles around to what's going to happen to me because of what they did. What does that mean about me because of what they did or I think they did? What about my future? What about all these plans I have? What about my finances? So ultimately it all comes back to me, and these are basic instincts of life. Like we need money, we need a place to live, we need, a roof over our head, we need food. But with addicts, these things, our self-esteem and our ambitions and our finances, these things are just run amok. Like we can never get enough before we need more. We get a little bit of the thing that we want and we need more, more, more. And there's sort of it's a bottomless pit. These things that we're seeking in other people, that ultimately we're not relying on our higher power to fill these needs. We're looking to people, and people are just never going to be able to do it. It's an unrealistic expectation. And the more we lean on others for these things, the more those resentments build. I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. So these words, spiritual malady, refer back to when we concluded that we have the problem that this book solves, back on page 44. It says two things. If, when you honestly want to, do you find you cannot quit your addictive behavior or your codependency entirely? And we concluded the answer to that question was we could not quit. Or if once you start drinking or acting out codependently, do you have a little control over the amount you take? And in the case of codependency, the amount you do or think about it. And if so, you are probably a codependent or probably an alcoholic. And if that's be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So we concluded the people that do this work, that need this work, conclude that they have a spiritual illness. And it's reiterating that right here. And then it tells us how this works, because many of us have also had associated mental issues and physical problems and financial problems. And it says right here that the way this works is when we straighten out, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally, physically. Another place in the book, it also says financially. So we've been trying to get everything else in line. We've been trying to get our health in line, our money in line, our relationships in line, our kids in line, our whatever it is. But we've been going about it the wrong way. If we're truly a person with a spiritual malady, we've got to address that. And the way we do that is we do this inventory. And the first part of this inventory is to look at the resentments. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. So there's something in here about when we do this inventory, we're going to look at everything that we're sore about. And they list people, institutions, or principles. So we've spent a lot of time before recovery. We have issue with many, many, many things, not just people, not just family members, not just friends, but co-workers and ex-partners and ex-wives and husbands and, just all kinds of people and that have been in our lives, our parents, our siblings. And then we also are looking at institutions, because many of us walked around complaining and having all kinds of opinions and, letting everybody know what we thought of, how institutions do things, like the government or the IRS or maybe some organization that we've been a part of or some place we used to work, and how awful they were and what they did. And so we're going to look at everything, and even principles. What are some of the things that are principles in our day-to-day lives, in our culture, that we completely disagree with, and we, bitch and complain about, and, make sure everybody knows our opinion about it. And so we're going to take a look at all of that, not just people. With that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. Picking up the reading, on page 65 in the big book, there is a chart that shows what a 4-step looks like. Instead of trying to read that chart, I'm going to talk about that chart just a little bit. So fundamentally, the chart is a list of names and principles and institutions, as was just mentioned. The middle column in the chart is causes of resentment, behavior that resulted in resentment. And then the right column in the chart is how it affected us, this list of self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal relations, sex relations that was referred to in the prior paragraph. The primary purpose is described in Tradition 5. It's to carry the message to others who still suffer, but we have got things that are blocking us from doing that, and that is part of what this 4-step process is designed to remove. And one of the origins of the primary purpose method came from a couple of guys by the name of Joe and Charlie, who toured the country doing 12-step workshops many decades ago, and Joe McHugh is a guy who wrote a book about that. He has actually several books about working the 12 steps. And one of the things Joe emphasized is that these resentments and these fears and this sex conduct that we're doing this 4-step inventory on are based in instincts. They're based in human instincts. They say resentments are so serious that they could kill us. And it was talked about a few minutes ago how much addicts overdo things. And this is an example of overdoing an instinct. The resentment instinct, maybe at its root, is that if someone doesn't like me, if someone is doing something to me that is affecting my self-esteem or my security or my ambitions, then I might not be safe. That's that word security. Now, the root of the instinct could go back millennia. If you think about sort of a caveman, I'm sorry to bring up such a simple example, but if somebody doesn't like you in that era of human history, you would lose possibly your access to warmth and shelter and fire and food and gathering and those kinds of things, and your life would be threatened. You might die because of this. Now, that isn't true for us typically, that our life is threatened because somebody doesn't like us, but we carry that instinct with us. It's God-given. It developed over millennia, and that's why resentments overdone can be fatal, because they are the ultimate blocker for us. They block us from a relationship with a higher power. They block us from being useful to other people. They block us from being able to put ourselves in a position of sanity and neutrality so that we no longer drink, whatever our drinking behavior is. We do not have any success with these resentments any more than we have success with the quitting of the behavior until we get them out of the way so that we can allow our higher power to be the one that runs the show. So second instinct is fear. It's a logical instinct. Fear shows up in the chart, 7, 8, 9 times under practically every item. In the caveman era, the fear was something big jumps out of the forest. It might eat you. You've got to run or you got to fight it. More modern times, your fear instinct is helpful. You don't cross the street when there's a car coming at a high rate of speed. Fear is what keeps you from getting hit. But again, as addicts overuse this fear instinct and make things out to be fatal when they are not. And so somebody paying attention to our wife, we literally make that out to be fatal, as if it's a tiger jumping out of the forest. That is how much we overdo this instinct. The Big Book gives us a solution to this. Sex, it's an obvious instinct, and the book actually refers to it as an instinct. It says our sex powers are God-given. Of course, they're procreative by their very nature. And there's lots of other things about physical intimacy that are good. However, we overdo this just like we do with resentments and just like we do with fears. So this is what the chart shows us. And with that, I will pass for now.
All right, we'll move on in the reading. When we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. So I'm Heather from Saskatchewan, and these 3 paragraphs are talking to us, first of all, about the effect of anger and resentment on the alcoholic. In the first paragraph, it talks about how, we experience shame and blame with others. We often see life and our relationships as a tally card where we, mark up points for and against. And we use that, we do that through rationalization and justification of our own behaviors in response to somebody else's. And so it tells us it is our resentment and our victimhood that keeps us in our addiction. It talks, there's some pretty strong language in that one paragraph about futility, unhappiness, fatal, dying, poison. All of these, resentments are a threat to our lives. And so by addressing our resentments, we begin to clear the path, as Dave talked about. We begin to clear the path to our higher power, and to begin to develop that relationship. And we can't do that if we don't clear away those resentments. Yeah. And I think I will pass there.
Thank you, Heather. This is Kathleen. So yeah, what a great thing to learn about. This is a new way of life, and we really we in many ways because of we're addicts, and because maybe what was we were taught to do, is about being angry and being sore and always having a reason to go pick up a drink. Um, and so what's happened with that though is they talk about squandering hours that might have been worthwhile. So all of the energy, all of our resources that went into being resentful and finding things to be resentful about, of holding on to resentments. It talks about we can't be the grouch in the brainstorm and be recovered, so we would just be grouchy and looking, if something upset us, we were like a radar for it, and we you know would think about that and carry it around and talk about it and obsess about it in our heads over and over and over again. And all that time, how much headspace goes towards that stuff. And in recovery, we learn that that's the case. And then we learn that if we want to be recovered and we don't want to drink anymore and we don't want to blow up our lives anymore or be codependent and be so obsessed and consumed with other people, that we're going to have to do something different. And what they're talking about is we're going to let go of these resentments by doing this inventory. And then we're going to have some extra time and space and energy and resources. And we're going to take that and we're going to turn and we're going to start being useful. And we're going to start being who we were intended to be. Um, we were not intended to be what these, walking full of resentments. And it cuts us off from the sunlight of the spirit. They say that, like, and we need that channel open, wide open, if we're going to, one, know what we're supposed to do next, that's in the highest good for all. We're going to need the sunlight of the spirit to know what our visions are and how to develop our lives and how to be useful. So it's really important that we get all this junk out of the way, and that's what we're doing, and then not carry resentments going forward. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Nicole. I've heard it described in recovery rooms that resentment is a poison that we take ourselves. So there's some sort of distorted thinking that we have that if we just get mad enough at life, at other people, either directly or indirectly, that somehow it's going to force the tide in our direction. And ultimately, what they're telling us is that it's coming down to, we're trying to get life on our terms. We're trying to get life to go our way, what we think we need. So, looking back at these instincts that Dave was talking about, the things that we think we need, where we'll finally have the self-esteem that we think we need. And we just keep, like for an alcoholic, there's never enough to satisfy us. We keep looking outside of ourselves and trying to get other people or things to fill up that self-esteem. We get a little bit and we need more. It's never enough. There's no end. And these instincts are so overblown for us. So just as one example, a self-esteem, and it's almost like at a certain point we get so lost in our disease that, as in war, the victor only seemed to win. It's like we're fighting and we're trying to win at something, and we've lost the thread of what it is we're even fighting against or what we're trying to win at. It's just this endless cycle of trying to get life our way, and it's never enough to really fill us up. And that ultimately, no amount of being mad at other people or mad at situations has ever really served us or changed a thing. It's just looking at the goods on our shelf and realizing it's just not serving us, and that ultimately resentment is blocking us from our access to our higher power, our access to love, our access to tolerance, our access to patience and pity and kindness towards others. We're just, even if we want to do and be those things, we generally take those actions or head in that direction if it's going to serve us in some way. So ultimately, kind of winding back to selfishness. But that ultimately is just cutting us off from being able to experience, pure love, the pure spirit of give, instead of sort of all of these actions that are out to get something for ourselves and not getting it and then getting angry about it. And I'll pass.
Okay, let's move on. The next couple of paragraphs. We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us. They, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully show and grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, "This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done." And I have a comment here about this, all this stuff that people had done and our resentments. What it was creating was that it was dominating us. It was causing us this, or we were allowing it to dominate us. And so the idea is here, how can we have freedom? Where can we find freedom? And how can we, basically have power over our own lives? Because right now, these people and the things that they did to us, supposedly, could actually kill us. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is Tina. So this first sentence here, return back to the list, for it held the key to the future. So the Oxford group that was a precursor to AA, they actually believed that this was not just a key to our individual future, but this way of living was the key to our collective future. This way of looking at where was I to blame. And then it says we begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. So that is very much like being in a prison cell, when we've always got somebody else in our head that we're thinking about, resenting. It's a prison. It dominates us. And it brings in this really important part that these wrongs, many of them are fancied. That means we make them up in our head. We think that we know what other people think. We think we know what their motives are. We think we know what this or that means. And a lot of it is just completely fiction. We are making stuff up. It's fancied. But it says, that has just as much power over us as if it were real. It has power to kill. So then it talks about how we can escape from this. And then this last paragraph on the bottom of page 66 and the top of first paragraph on 67 contain our prayer that transitions us from this focus on others to beginning to look at ourselves. This prayer, and the prayer, basically, it's not written here, but the prayer I was given was, God, fill in the blank, person's name was spiritually sick and suffering just like me. Help me to show person's name the same tolerance, pity, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Show me how I can be helpful to them. Save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. So what that does is it says that they're spiritually sick and suffering. And the word suffering is important for me because in my sponsor suggested it because it means that the symptoms that I see are symptoms of suffering. They're not intentionally pointing at me. They're just the other person's symptoms of their suffering. I also have symptoms. I tend to think my symptoms are superior symptoms, and your symptoms are the bad ones. But what it's starting to do in this paragraph is it's starting to see that how alike we all are. And that we can begin to see that people aren't intentionally out to get us, that they're also sick and suffering like us. And then it does a magical, wonderful, amazing thing in that last sentence or two. It says, how can I be helpful to him? Save me from being angry. Thy will be done. It doesn't say, how can I get liked or how can I get loved or any of those things. It says, how can I be helpful? And I'm talking to God when I'm saying this. I'm not talking to the other person. I'm talking to God and saying, guide me and direct me. How can I be helpful? And this asking how we can be helpful starts to transform our lives. And we start, because most of us go into situations all day long looking for what we can get out of a situation. Can I get liked here? Can I get attention here? Can I get wanted, needed, whatever? But this is turning us around, and it's starting to acquaint us to this idea of being helpful, of being useful, of looking to what we can contribute instead of what we can get out of life. And why that is so crucial is because until we're connected to that purpose that we were meant to live, we're going to be out of sorts, irritable, discontent, unreasonable, and looking to get high in some way, looking to satisfy our craving. And until we make this shift into bringing and giving and contributing. So this is the beginning of it. This is the very beginning of even a notion of that. And it comes right here between the fourth and the fifth steps. How can I be helpful? And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. I want to just take a minute to reinforce this sentence. The wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. We all know what that word fancied means. It means made up, imagined. Our head and our thinking is now busy with what was said or what event took place. And we are making up a bunch of stuff which the big book called playing God. Our head is now busy pretending that it, in fact, is God and that what it thinks is real, that it can sort of get away with adding a whole bunch of additional stuff to whatever actually was said or what actually took place. And this fancied stuff, it says, has the power to actually kill. We really have no hope if we are going to hang out in our head and listen to our mind talk to us and play God in that way. The addicts, that's going to take them straight down into the deeper bottom. And for those of us who really struggle with this disease of addiction, we may not survive that. The only solution is to continue doing this work outlined in the fourth step to move in a different direction, and that is to clear these blocks and listen to our higher power rather than listen to our mind. with that word fancied. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to continue with the reading. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. And I'll make a quick comment here. It says that we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. So again, we are being instructed to look at other people as people like us, people who are sick and suffering. And if we do retaliate or argue, we destroy our chance of being helpful. So again, it's reminding us that we have a glorious plan and purpose for our lives, and that plan, instead of looking to get our way in every circumstance and situation, it's seeking to be helpful. But it quickly tells us that we can't be helpful to all people, but at least God can show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. So there are some folks, and we've been there ourselves, who aren't ready to be helped. We need to collect more misery and suffering. And that's not something that someone can do we can't do that for any other person. We all have to get to this willingness ourselves. And I like how it used the word mistakes. We looked for our own mistakes. It doesn't, it just makes it so light. It's like, oh, I'm making mistakes. If I want a good life, here's a path. And if I want to be happy, joyous, and free, as this book offers, one of the promises of working these steps is to be happy, joyous, and free, then I'm just looking for mistakes. It's kind of like if you've got a road map, and you're trying to get from point A to point B, and you're over there at point G, you took a wrong turn. So it's telling us we're going to look for our own mistakes here. And then it starts telling us what specifically those mistakes are: selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened. And it tells us that we're going to disregard the other person involved entirely. Again, here's the opportunity for freedom. When we look at things this way, is everybody who's misbehaving, including ourselves, is sick and suffering. It's not personal. And so we have this opportunity to be free. We disregard the other person involved entirely. We look exclusively at where were we to blame. We're ready to do this because nothing else that we've tried has worked. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. I thought maybe I would give a simple example. This is for codependency, but let's say that I'm angry and resentful because I called somebody and he didn't call me back. And so I'm angry, well, he didn't call me back. And, I have all kinds of judgments about that and I make up all kinds of stories about it. And, that's the other person's action, that's their behavior. So if we're not going to be looking at their behavior, we look at our own. And so maybe what I find when I really honestly look at if I was, what instincts I might have been trying to get um to feel better about or to get. Maybe I when I called and or when I called to ask and invite them somewhere, I wasn't really giving to give. I was calling with an expectation. And maybe I was even using this person to make me feel better about myself. Because if they are willing, if they call me back, if they come along, then they like me. And that makes me feel better about myself. Or maybe I'm doing it because I want to belong. I feel alone. So this person is going to make me feel better because now I belong somewhere. Or maybe I have some ambition. I'm not willing to go somewhere or do this thing on my own. So I have an expectation that you call me back so that I can do this thing that I want to do, when maybe it's not even higher powers' will for me to go do it, or maybe it's higher powers' will for me to go do it alone. So that's a simple example of how we have resentment because somebody didn't do what we wanted them to do, but what we wanted them to do was going to serve this getting liked or loved or belonging or some ambition to get something done in life that we wanted to get done. And we're trying to run the show, and we're expecting that this person do all of that for us rather than calling just to give and see how the person is. So with that, I pass.
Okay, we're going to transition into giving examples of our character defects. And we're going to start with examples of selfishness. And I'm going to give an example of self-centered. So, an example of that is when someone does a behavior that that I make about me. So let's say they are, they don't get back to me if I've contacted them, or they don't reciprocate if I've invited them to something they haven't reciprocated. So when I make up a story that it's about me, that, I'm not lovable, or I'm not likable, or I'm not important, or I make up those things instead, and that's self-centered, instead of that they might have busy lives. And another example of this is an important adult in my childhood who was unkind to me. And I made up that, and specifically it was, I was told that I was hideous and ugly and disgusting. And I took that on, that was the truth about me. And when I did this step work, what I realized is that was coming from that person's own, what we talked about before in that prayer, their own suffering, that it didn't have anything to do with me. And it is self centered. I know that it's hard because if it's directed at us, we think it must be about us, when in fact, pretty much everything that anybody says or does is about that person, not about us. And when I make what other people do or don't do about me, that is an example of the defect of self centeredness. Are there any other examples under the selfish ones?
Thanks, Tina. One of my defects, it's a common one, I'm guessing. I suppose it falls under selfish. It's also dishonest. Is I feel bad about myself, and I know where the root of this is. I mean, I have a chronic feel bad about myself problem, and the root is my family of origin. I was compared in competition a lot by my parents and other people, and it didn't matter what the topic was. It could be academics, could be athletics, could be music, could be art, could be, handyman stuff. It doesn't matter. It was always something to do with, if you would do it like this other person, then you'd be better, kind of stuff. Even religion. And rather than dwell in blame and victimhood about that, because I know where the root is, I have made amends to my parents for that. Today, the result is that when somebody says a statement that has my name in it, and they express their feelings about something maybe I did or didn't do, those words about me, well, what they may be sharing is about me. My name's in the sentence or whatever, but what they're sharing is their feelings. What they're sharing is their experience. This isn't my experience, it is their experience. So I have to understand that this about me thing isn't that simplistic. Well, you used my name. That's not the about me that we're talking about. It's these aren't my feelings. These aren't my experience. They're the other person's. And that really helps me get a degree of, well, objectivity, number one, and compassion. Actually, maybe listen, perhaps, as opposed to react and reinforce that baseline that I feel bad about myself. Character defect. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Heather. I guess what came up for me around the selfishness part of character defects was my attitude, I guess, toward my husband's drinking. I thought, that I could use my anger, my tears, my contempt or whatever to get him to quit drinking. That I was his higher power. And if I said, you need to quit drinking, he would do it. And that lesson was learned very quickly when that didn't happen and I hit a bottom. And so if I get disturbed, I know now, if, I get disturbed about wanting someone to act a certain way or do certain things, then that's me playing God. And I don't have control over that. I only have control over myself, my actions, my thinking, and taking instruction from my higher power. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. Let's move on to dishonest, and people can give examples if they have any. My example is I'm blaming you for choices I make. It is dishonest to not accept responsibility for my choices. So there are many, many times where I resent something that I actually am participating in. And instead of taking responsibility for, if it's not something that I want to do, not something I want to spend my time on, then I need to take responsibility for um, doing the things that I want to spend my time on instead. So resenting other people because they force me to, or they made me do it, or whatever, um, isn't honest. It's dishonest. Are there any other examples for the dishonest defects?
This is Dave. The definition of dishonest is so much broader than the sort of textbook definition lying or withholding information, honesty. Um, an example I can think of is on our list of exact nature of our wrongs examples here, that I have a serious defect, and I'm owning this and admitting this, of thinking that I am right, that my way is the right way, and this manifests in 1,000 different little things. Everything from maybe where I keep the car keys to, how the dishes are managed in the kitchen or whatever. These are just, examples. It repeats over and over and over again that my way is better or why my way is right. And that is dishonest. You thought, well, there's no lying involved in that, but it's dishonest to think that someone else's way needs to be my way because my way is any better than their way. What that results in is blame, and it results in feeling a victim, and it results in all kinds of chaos and conflict and confusion and disharmony in relationship with others. And so every time and any time I'm taking my own side and thinking that my right is better than whatever you think is the right way, I need to see that as a defect and the dishonesty for what it is. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Dave. This is Heather. What comes up for me around dishonesty, I think my biggest defect of character is the habit and mindset of knowing what other people are thinking and creating huge stories around what I think people are thinking, and to, snowball those stories into great big narratives that put me against that person, um, and ultimately end up, with me being rejecting maybe of somebody because I have, made up this big story in my head. And the other one that came up for me was expecting higher standards of other people that I don't expect of myself. And I think where that was really visible was with my parents. I think I had the idea that, my parents were um, expected to be perfect. I did not understand that my parents were normal human beings just like me. They had their own stories, they had their own hurts, they had their own history, um, and they had their own sick and suffering behaviors. But I resented them because I thought they weren't good enough, even though the things that they did, a lot of the obviously, the lot of things that they did, I repeated myself because I that's what I learned. And so those are 2 that came up for me around dishonesty.
Thanks, Heather. A couple other ones for me around dishonesty is either giving something with an expectation of getting something back or doing something with the unspoken, expectation of getting someone to do something for me. So those things are dishonest. Also, hiding. It's like, if I don't show up and be visible and communicate my ideas, my preferences, I just hide around my truth. I hide around my ideals. I hide around what's right for me. That is also dishonest. And the last one I'm going to use for an example here is, oh, there's two more: bringing the past into the present. So, um, dragging the past around. Um, what we learn when we work the 12 steps is we've got this 24 hours, and we need to stay in this 24 hours if we want that promised happy, joyous, and free life. And then the last one I'm going to say, is this idea of gossip, that it's dishonest to speak about people who are not present. That to be honest, if I've got a gripe with somebody, or if I need to talk to somebody about something, I need to speak to that person themselves. It's dishonest to speak about somebody who isn't present instead of speaking to them. It's also dishonest to listen to other people speak about people who are not present. Okay, let's move into self-seeking examples. Does anybody have any examples of that?
Yeah, as far as self-seeking, for instance, not saying something or doing something that really is what, or let's just say doing something, not doing something that really is maybe higher power's will for me, or, something that's, yeah, an ideal that I have, um, or even a plan that I've been inspired about, and not doing that because there's the fear of disappointing somebody else or upsetting them. And then that's basically what I'm trying to do, is get their approval, and I'm trying to get them to like me, like get, or maybe even back to what I was saying earlier, I want to belong. So if I do this thing, then I'm going to end up belonging. I'm going to have somebody to be with. I'm going to not be alone. And using people that way. So that's me seeking those things, but I do it through, not wanting to disappoint others. Um, and all of that builds resentment for me. But really, I'm doing something that I don't want to do, or that that's not true for me. And then I blame the other person when I get resentful. I think participating in gossiping would be another example. And that's again about belonging, or, wanting people to. So if I sit around and gossip with uh, my family, that's what they taught me to do. That's a lot of times, how they bond. Um, and so if I'm gossiping, I'm trying to be a part of the group. And if I'm a part of the group, then I won't be left out. And if I'm not left out, I'm not alone. So I'll find things to gossip about, um, to try to be a part of the group, or to connect to somebody. And in recovery, we learn about how we can connect and belong without using other people and hurting other people.
This is Tina. I really like the self-seeking examples. That's was so beneath most of my defects. This looking to get liked, looking to get loved, looking to get approval, looking to get belonging, managing image. All of those are very self-seeking behaviors. Is there anybody else who has any additional comments before we move into our closing? Okay, thank you for joining us today. Our next podcast will continue step 4. We will move into fears, sex, and other harms. Again, you can find our meetings at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. We meet each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Join us on the road of happy destiny.